Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss an article in the Financial Times concerning the way Labour seem to be talking a bit about Brexit. Not because they've been asked questions about it, because the media aren't all that interested in asking questions about it, but just because they've wanted to. Now, in a sense, this is only surprising in terms of the timing, despite the contradictory thoughts some people have about the most energetic voices for Remain now suddenly being born-again Brexiteers. The vast majority of Labour are pro-EU and anti-Brexit. The Lexiteers, yeah, there were some, but there was a common thread running through them, which means they're not really around anymore. Labour are full of people throughout the party who are no friends of Brexit. I'd also remind people of this simple fact. As soon as Labour stop growing the economy, they cannot expect to win the following election. In 2010, people were still better off at the end of that parliament than at the beginning. The investment was still continuing. The NHS was number one in the world and still getting better, but the economy was not growing as it should, so off they went. Yes, with a better campaign, maybe things could have been a bit different, but the major factor was the economy. So there's simply no motivation for Labour to join the Brexit circus. As difficult as it is for some to understand, what they're doing is managing a political hot potato in the best way they can. I'll also point out that trade experts such as David Hennig are broadly supportive of Labour's general approach. Something that people often forget is there's a whole range of schemes which exist for non-EU countries to get some of the benefits of either the single market or the customs union. People behave as if, you know, there's the single market, there's the customs union, and anything else is just tinkering around the edges. That is not the case. I'd already said last year there was a lot of talk about the Pan-European Mediterranean Convention at the Labour conference last year. This would be huge, save a lot of expensive paperwork and tariffs. Which brings me to what Labour seem to be saying now. So the Financial Times is reporting Rachel Reeves talking about improvements to the UK's deal with the EU. Now, at the moment, this is a fairly pointless statement in many ways, because Labour have said this for a while, and yet it's not immediately obvious exactly what improvements they want or think they can get or how they think they can get them. Although it is sometimes grimly hilarious to hear people say the same thing. Oh yeah, Labour talk about this, but how are they going to do it? And yet these same people will say we should join the single market. And you ask them, okay, so how are we going to do that then? Oh, I don't know that. But anyway, what was most interesting was Reeves saying that most financial services companies did not regard Brexit as being a great opportunity for their businesses. Now, people should be seizing on this statement. It's a hell of a thing for an almost chancellor to be saying. See, right now, it's really clear that Brexit has shafted our trading good. That is absolutely obvious. Even most of the Brexit lunatics have given up arguing on that one. There are a few who produce figures without taking inflation into account to go, no, it's up. Yeah, try doing it for volumes, mate. There are some who just literally make numbers up. But the broad Brexit base has given up. They say, okay, yeah, goods is down. Yeah, okay. Even the Conservatives tend to try and talk about trade potential rather than actual results right now. But, they argue, but we are a service economy anyway, and our trading services is doing rather well. And it's like, yes, it is. That is because Brexit didn't do that much to hamper most services. There are some who, of course, have been properly shafted. For example, those who need to travel around Europe to deliver those services in person. But the usual, most of the financial legal services were mostly fine. And as a result, they have been continued to carry on growing. They've not been boosted. They've just been allowed to carry on growing. That is not the same as benefiting. Now, if the incoming chancellor is acknowledging, without even being prompted, that financial services are not really benefiting from Brexit, and anything connected to the trading goods definitely isn't, then there's scope there for her to be asked, so which sectors are benefiting and what percentage of our GDP do they account for? Is the answer in both cases 0? because asking the right questions really is the way to get serious debate started. And that's what I want to happen next Parliament. We were never going to get a serious debate with the media. When the media don't want to have a debate and the current government don't want to have a debate, we're not going to get one. We need at least one of those two to want one, because asking the right questions is the way to get that debate started. Then there was another interesting feature to this interview, a bespoke deal for the chemicals industry aimed at preventing the £2 billion worth of massive trade barriers we have for imports right now. And something that Labour can, of course, do without needing to talk to the EU, because it's about imports. We decide what happens with imports. Now, this is a serious problem, of course. It's one of the reasons it's cheaper for water companies to just dump raw sewage than just treat it. It's because access to chemicals has now been massively hampered. This was warned about before we left the EU. And I don't just mean the wider problems for the chemical industry, it was worth over £75 billion in 2021. I mean, there were specific warnings about how we would struggle to get the chemicals needed to treat water. I did a video on it myself. So Reeves is proposing that we align standards for the chemical industry so that producers in Europe don't need to mess about with British-only registrations. So the idea is that she says when people voted for Brexit in her constituency, it was about immigration, not diverging chemical standards. And this is another indication of what I'd said I felt Labour would do to slowly reverse the negative impacts of Brexit over time. Quietly, behind closed doors, no great fuss. Remember, the fuss is what people want to avoid. I cannot stress enough. You know, you might be there with everyone you know is like anti-Brexit or pro-Brexit, but probably anti-Brexit if you're watching this channel. And you don't understand that there are a lot of families out there who have strained relations or broken relations because of Brexit. It's the thing that broke families apart more than anything since the English Civil War. I have known people myself who've had these family relations either strained or completely broken by it. What people definitely do not want is for those wounds to be opened up again. So boring, quiet, behind the scenes for as long as or for as much as we can, until we do have to make one of the big steps. And this is what I feel Labour are doing here. They're going, well, let's align standards on chemicals, because then we can get the water companies to treat the sewage properly. Popular outcome. Nobody can really come up with an argument for why we should have divergent standards on chemicals anyway. Nobody will care what Jacob Rees-Mogg has to say about it, because he won't even be an MP. And then they can do that for another sector of the economy and another. Each time we're just aligning standards on this because it's in our interest. There'll be an economic benefit and we support those standards anyway. Why wouldn't we? And not many will have a beef with it, rather than doing it all in one go. And I'm not sure how many of the Brexit papers are really going to get people worked up about the latest technical discussions on CLP regulations. I mean, Boris Johnson himself would have called that a snooze fest. And this is what I would call the first phase of reversing Brexit properly. I mean, you compare that line in the Lib Dem manifesto, which some people like, because it mentions the single market. But they describe a series of steps which needs to take place before we can even think about joining the single market. And you go, all of those are Labour policies. So if people like the paragraph in the Lib Dem manifesto, you're thinking, so why are you objecting when Labour's has exactly the same steps in it? That in fact, Labour have been more detailed about those steps in terms of how they're going to do it, because they're the ones who are going to do it. All they've missed off is the bit at the end that says, oh, at the end of this, we should probably join the single market. And yes, I know they are, it's not just that they've missed it off. They are explicitly saying we're not going to join the single market. But they also said they would introduce tuition fees. How did that work out? And finally, I would just add one thing. Rachel Reeves doesn't actually know the state of the economy, not really. She has access to the publicly available information, and a lot of information has to be made public. But once she becomes chancellor, she will be shown the books. She will be shown the full horror of the situation, at which point she's perfectly entitled to do a press conference where it says, okay, you would not believe the shitstorm I've just been shown back there. And one thing that I want Rachel Reeves to be asked, hopefully she wouldn't need to be asked it, but just in case, one thing I definitely think she needs to be asked, if there is one question that would be the best to ask of any chancellor that actually wants to address the mess, it is this. The Treasury runs economic impact assessments for literally every policy that can have an economic impact. Why has there never been an economic impact assessment for Brexit, and when can we expect Labour to do one? Because literally the most impactful economic policy this country has had in modern times at least, and the government have never had officials work out the consequences. They're happy to debunk the assessments of independent bodies like the Office for Budgetary Responsibility, but they've never countered with their own assessment because there isn't one. They told officials not to do one. I cannot think of another question that would be better in terms of getting that serious discussion going. And I'll tell you another thing. The best way to get that discussion going as well is going to be having it run by a Liberal Democrat opposition, because a Conservative leader of the opposition is never going to ask that question. And we also know the media are never going to ask that question. But if you're not partisan and you fancy this outcome, very important to encourage people to vote tactically to reduce the number of Tory MPs to a minimum. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.